Hello dear students, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy interview guidance program. So in today's lecture we are going to discuss about the major issues in higher education. So in India, higher education system has been facing a lot of issues, a lot of challenges. So the youth which are coming out of the colleges are largely unemployed. So according to a survey, around 52% of youth who are coming out of colleges are actually unemployed. So therefore in this context we will understand the major issues or the major challenges with respect to higher education system in India. Now recently there was a survey that was being released by Periodic Labor Force Participation Survey. So you may have heard about this survey. So this survey has actually said that unemployment rate among graduates is actually higher in many other developing countries. Now if you look at the unemployment rate in graduates in India, it is higher in India when we compare it with other countries. So this is what the Periodic Labor Force Participation Survey has actually said about higher education system in India. So why the youth remain unemployed? So it is majorly because of there's a mismatch in the skills required by the industry and the skills which already our youth have. So therefore majority of the youth are actually out of touch with the skills that are actually required by the industries in India. So this is what the Periodic Labor Force Participation Survey has actually said about the employability of youth in India. Now in this context we have to understand major issues with respect to unemployment in India. Now what are the major issues? Now we had faced COVID-19 pandemic. So because of the COVID-19 pandemic, in order to curb the spread of this pandemic, the governments have imposed intense lockdowns across the country. So because of this intense lockdowns, the education system is one of the worst impacted sectors. Now students who actually enrolled during the pandemic times, so there were students also who enrolled in colleges during the pandemic times, so they have graduated after the pandemic. So now there are the concerns that the employability of those students who are enrolled in colleges during the times of pandemic, so they lack the necessary knowledge, necessary skills. And this is particularly because of majority of most of the education has taken place through online mode, right? So the quality of online education is also in question. So because of this reason, now why it is in question? Because teachers lack skills. Teachers lack specific skills with respect to online education, and digital divide is another problem. So apart from digital divide, we should also talk about the lack of infrastructure. So all these problems have led to the low unemployability of youth, especially graduates in India. So after that we need to talk about the learning loss as well. Now learning loss is also because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now COVID-19 pandemic has led to the closing down of all the colleges across the country. So therefore students have to adopt online mode of learning. So they have to focus or concentrate on long hours during the online learning process. So this is also another factor that has severely impacted the learning abilities of students. So when it impacts the learning abilities of students, that will also have a lot of impact on the employability. Okay, so employability is also in question. So apart from above mentioned challenges, there are also another concern, that is learning deficiencies. So these learning deficiencies within the students because of the learning losses and students adopting the online mode of education, so which lacks the quality, the relevant or necessary quality. So this learning deficiencies ultimately affected the learning abilities of students, and when it impacts the learning abilities, so they will not be employable. So that is where the problem of unemployment comes in India. So that is where the problem of unemployment comes in India. So apart from that, there are structural issues also. Okay, so there are few structural issues. For example, if you look at the structure of higher education, so private sector presence has been significantly increasing. Okay, so there's a lot of private sector presence So because of the private sector presence and expansion of the private sector, that led to the decline in quality of education, and even regulation is also a major issue. Okay, so regulation is also a major issue because of the expansion of higher education. So after that, we need to talk about lack of regulation. Okay, so lack of regulation is also another major problem in higher education. For example, there's a lack of clarity, lack of responsibility, roles of the state government, central government, and university grants commission with respect to regulation. So what is their role, how they can regulate these higher educational institutions or even the private educational institutions, whether providing more autonomy, whether providing along with autonomy to decide their own curriculum. So all these challenges have been plaguing the higher education system, and in turn has also affecting the ability of these higher educational institutions to produce skilled human resources. So apart from that, there are issues with unemployment or employment. So as continuation of the earlier mentioned, if you look at India's agriculture sector, so it is mostly traditional in nature. Okay, so it is traditional agriculture. Now traditional agriculture means it has not adopted technology, or it does not lack enough mechanization as well. So this is another major problem with the Indian agriculture, since majority of the youth are looking for the skilled employment, so technology intensive employment opportunities. Still Indian agriculture is not mechanized, it does not use advanced technologies, so therefore it is not able to attract the educated youth into the agriculture sector. So that is where the major problem with the agriculture sector. Now if you look at the agriculture sector, it is one of the most underproductive sector. So majority of the workforce has been engaged in the agriculture sector. Even then also GDP contribution is very low, and the agriculture wages are very low. Okay, so therefore in this context there is also a need to reform agriculture sector, and even there's a need to shift excessive workforce from the agriculture sector to other sectors such as manufacturing and industries. So apart from that, we need to talk about opportunities as well. So when people have low skills, they will not have enough opportunities. For example, there's an industry and this particular industry requires specific skills, and if youth does not possess the skills which are required by the industry, okay, so of course they will remain unemployed, or they will engage in low skilled service sector. Okay, so therefore some graduates have been taking low skilled jobs in this service sector, and this is particularly due to limited opportunities or lack of opportunities in the economy. So what does this mean? So we talked about traditional agriculture. So agriculture has not adopted mechanization or technology. And apart from that, if you look at the manufacturing sector, so manufacturing sector presence in India is also very low. So apart from manufacturing sectors, the labor intensive industries are also very low in India. So because of this reason, the educated youth lack enough opportunities. So after that, we need to talk about the research and development aspect as well, because research and development plays one of the most important and most prominent role in any country's growth and development, even providing enough employment opportunities through entrepreneurship. Now if you look at India's overall spending on research and development, it is just 0.7% of GDP. So it is very low when we compare this with majority of the developed countries. So if you look at South Korea, it has been spending around 4% of its GDP on research and development. So when you compare it with India, it is just spending 0.7% of its GDP on researchers. So this particular aspect, spending enough on research and development, has actually been hampering creation of new knowledge and innovation. Now creation of new knowledge and innovation is actually a foundation for entrepreneurship as well as enough employment creation, right? So after that we need to talk about the public private partnership, and there's an imbalance which exists in public private partnership. Now if you look at the research development spending between public sector and the private sector, the public sector has been spending enough on research and development. So however, the private sector has not been spending enough on research and development. For example, private sector jobs in research and collaboration between industry and academia, right? So when they are not investing enough on research and development, they will not be able to create enough employment opportunities. In fact, so the private sector in India, one of the largest employment providers. So therefore, in this context, the private sector should also spend enough money on research and development. So that will help in further generating a lot of jobs in India. Okay, so these are the major issues with respect to employment in India. So after that, there are certain concerns with respect to the examination system in India. So this is also another dimension which has been impacting the higher education system in India. So the first and foremost problem with the education system in India, that is rote learning. So we have been focusing on grades, marks, rather than the conceptual clarity, knowledge that the students have developed, and the practical knowledge that they have about the subjects. So this is where the problem comes. Students are tested based on memory or high pass percentages. So if you look at the education system from the primary education up to the higher education levels, so it is mostly focused on memory and high pass percentages grades, rather than the practical knowledge. So when we emphasize on practical knowledge and developing innovativeness among the students, so that will help in further creating more entrepreneurship and employment opportunities. So that is where the essence of higher education system actually lies in. So after that, another major problem is decentralized assessment. So in India, there are diversified modes of assessment. There's no single assessment of these higher educational institutions. So there are different modes of assessment of these higher educational institutions. So even though we have a diversified modes of assessment, it is mainly guided by secrecy, lack of transparency, and there's lack of standardization. So this specifically leads to a lot of scandal and other issues such as corruption. Okay, so this is another major problem with the examination system in India. So another major aspect that we have to discuss is inconsistency in the examination pattern with respect to the higher educational institutions. Now if you look at the question papers, so they have errors, and apart from that, they are irrelevant and low standards. Okay, so the evaluation is also not strict, and evaluation very often considered as unfair and inaccurate. And this sort of evaluation does not actually reflect students' learning outcomes as well. So this is also another major problem with the examination system in India. And we need to talk about mismatch between the skills required by the industry as well as the skills which are possessed by the students, and this is where majority of the students remain unemployable in India. So India skill report says around 51 to 52% of graduates remain unemployable because there's a mismatch between the skills required by the industry and the skills possessed by the students. So the examination boards, they actually do not test or certify students on higher order skills, so that are actually required for the employability. Now when they have the higher order skills and they have acquired the certification of these higher order skills, so they are readily employable. So that is where we can manage, or we can deal with the problem of unemployment. So after that, we need to talk about the fiscal support that is being extended by the government to these research institutions and higher educational institutions. Now if you look at the history of financial support, it is a poor financial support that is being made to these higher educational institutions. And in fact, India has set a gross enrollment ratio of 50% from 27%. Okay, so national education policy has also envisioned that existing high enrollment in higher education should be further expanded from present or current 27% to 50%. However, so in order to meet this target, we need to make, there should be a proper provision for the fiscal support or the financial support to the higher educational institutions in order to achieve this goal by the year 2035. However, enough funds or adequate funds are not actually allocated in order to meet this target, and this is also another major problem. Okay, poor fiscal support or financial support. So in this context, we have to understand what lies ahead. So what is the way forward? So we have a number of universities, private universities, public universities, even foreign universities are also allowed to set up their campuses in India. So therefore, these universities have to be adequately funded. Now, when we have universities, when we have funded them in an adequate manner, this will help them develop infrastructure, and this will also help them develop research and development facilities, and this provides more and more fiscal autonomy to these institutions to take majority of the decisions with respect to the students. Okay, so in all these aspects, funding will help these higher educational institutions. Now, apart from the funding, we need to talk about the collaboration. Okay, so these higher educational institutions must have active collaborations with the industries. So that is where we know the relevance or importance of the industry relevant skills. So when industry has been collaborating with the higher educational institutions and higher educational institutions with industry, now higher educational institutions can provide quality skilled workforce to these industries. Okay, so in turn, industries can benefit from the quality human resources. So there should be a proper collaboration between higher educational institutions and industry. Now, we need to emphasize on vocational education and vocational training as well. So particularly from the class 10 and class 12 students. Okay, so they have to be diverted, or they can be diverted towards vocational training. So this will help in promoting inclusiveness and equity with the education system. So in line with this program, we already have different schemes like Sankalp and Strive. So Sankalp and Strive were launched by the Government of India with the help of World Bank. Okay, so with the help of World Bank. So therefore, diverting the students of class 10 and class 12 towards the vocational training will create more inclusiveness and equity. So India should have a dedicated industrial policy as well as the manufacturing strategy. So when we have such a dedicated industrial policy, so the industrial policy will also outline the what is the goal of employment creation in the coming 5 years or 10 years. So in line with that particular policy, we will create enough incentives, opportunities, funding if required, and even a proper roadmap for developing industries and creating a lot of employment opportunities in India. So along with that, we should also have a manufacturing strategy, so that will specifically guide the economic development in India. So there are different professional bodies for the assessment of higher educational institutions in India. So these professional bodies have to be involved in curriculum design, and technology should be used to standardize and enhance the assessment process as well. So that is where regularly updating the curriculum, syllabus, and making it more relevant for the industry requirements, everything can be possible. So after that, the external audit of assessment systems in universities and school boards is essential. So it is very important because it can deal with the secrecy, lack of transparency in the higher educational institutions. So it brings in more and more accountability and transparency. So therefore, and a credible examination system is one of the key ways to improve the standard of education, especially the higher education system in India. Now, if we take all these measures in higher education system, apart from these measures, we need to look at the funding, providing autonomy to the higher educational institutions, and attracting the foreign private educational institutions. Okay, so different collaboration with the higher educational institutions and industries is very important for improving gross enrollment ratio in the education system. And apart from that, we need to talk about participation of women in STEM fields. Okay, so participation of women in STEM fields and women participation in higher education. Okay, so that is also important aspect when we talk about higher education system in India. So that's all about this topic, and thank you for being with me. And if you like the video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. And if you have any suggestions, doubts, please write those in the comment section. Thank you.